She came up on my left shoulder at the bottom of Prine Street, matching my pace, absolutely destroyed. Do you always make girls chase you? She got it out in 3 separate pieces because she had no air, and then she put both hands on her knees and stayed like that for about 11 seconds, while I stood there in the road at 6:40 in the morning trying to work out what had happened. Faye, give me a minute. Wheeze. I've been working on this for 3 weeks, and I would like to enjoy it. I'm Beau, 34, and I teach PE at the high school in Kirby, and I have run the same 4-mile loop at 6 a.m. every weekday morning for 12 years. Faye Dunbar has lived in the house across from mine for 8 months. She is a dentist. She had, to my knowledge, never run anywhere in her life. 3 weeks? 3 weeks. She straightened up, still red to the ears. I started at the end of the drive, then the corner, then Prine Street, which took me 9 days, and I want you to understand that I hated every second of it, and I'd do it again. You could have just knocked on my door. She looked at me like I'd suggested she solve it with a trebuchet. Beau, you leave at 6:15, you're at school by 7:40, you're back at 6 in the evening, and on the 2 occasions I've come over to say hello. You've been polite for 90 seconds and then gone inside. She was still catching her breath. I'm not knocking on a door for that, I'd rather do cardio. I want to be honest that I had no defense for any part of that. How did you even know where I turn? I watched from my kitchen for a week and worked out the loop from which direction you came back. She said this the way another person would say they'd checked a bus timetable. Then I drove it. It's 4 miles. You do it in about 31 minutes, which I looked up, and which is apparently quite fast for a man who eats the amount of cereal you buy. You've been monitoring my shopping. You leave the boxes in the recycling, Beau. It's not surveillance. It's a bin. She was still hunched over with her hands on her thighs while she said all of this. And I remember standing in the middle of Prine Street at 6:40 in the morning, laughing properly for the first time, and I could not have told you how long. Here's the thing about that 4-mile loop. I ran distance in college. Ran it well, actually, well enough that there was a version of my 20s where it was going to be the whole thing. And then, in the spring of my senior year, I ruptured an Achilles at a meet in Ohio in front of about 200 people, and that was that. I want to be accurate about the injury because I have spent 12 years being inaccurate about it in my own head. It was mile 4 of a 10,000 meters. I heard it before I felt it. There's a sound. People say it's like a gunshot, and it isn't. It's more like somebody snapping a wet towel. And I went down on the inside of lane 1. And the thing I remember most clearly is not pain. It's that the field ran past me. All of them. That's the correct thing for them to do, and I'd have done it too, and I have never once got over it. The surgery was fine. The recovery was fine. I have full function, and I have had full function for 12 years. What I have not had, in 12 years, is a single morning where I didn't get up at 6:10 and go and do it anyway. I don't race. I haven't entered anything since 2013. I just go out and do the same 4 miles at the same pace, alone, every morning, and I write the time on a card and put the card in a drawer, and there are now about 3,000 cards in that drawer. That is not a hobby. I'm aware of what that is. I've been aware for years and have declined to look at it directly. My mother asked me about it once, about 4 years in. She said carefully, in the way she does, "Do you enjoy it, love?" And I said yes, and she said right, and never brought it up again. And I have thought about that exchange approximately 11,000 times. So Faye Dunbar catching up to me on Prine Street was, in a way I could not have explained at the time, a much bigger event than a neighbor saying good morning. She ran with me the following Monday, badly. "You're going too slow. I'm going at your pace." I know, that's what I said. She had about 40% of a lung available. "Don't do that, go your pace. I'll catch up eventually or I won't." That's not how, Beau, I pull teeth out of the heads of frightened adults for a living. I'm not going to be humored on a road. So I went my pace. She fell off by the 2nd mile, and I looped back and got her, and she called me something unrepeatable, and we did the same thing on Wednesday and Friday. By the end of the third week, she could hold my shoulder for 2.5 miles. By the end of the second month, she could do the whole loop, badly, and had opinions about the route. Why do you go left at the water tower? Because that's the loop. It's 100 meters longer than going right, and there's a hill for no reason. She was hunched over her knees at my mailbox, which had become the traditional post-run position. You've been running an extra 100 meters a day for 12 years because of a decision you made when you were 22. That's 438 kilometers, I said before I could stop myself. She straightened up and looked at me. You did that in your head. I did that in about 2016, and I've never told anybody. Beau. She was delighted. That is the single strangest thing anyone has ever admitted to me, and I once had a man tell me he'd been flossing with fishing line. That is a fair sample of what running with Faye Dunbar is like. She is relentlessly, unembarrassedly curious, and she asks the question everyone else has decided is impolite, and she does it while dying. Here's what you need to know about Faye Dunbar. She is a person of extraordinary and slightly frightening deliberateness. She moved to Kirby after her practice partnership dissolved. She chose the town off a spreadsheet, and she has told me, with no embarrassment whatsoever, that the house across from mine was 4th on her list, and she took it because of the light in the kitchen. She does not do things by accident, which means that 3 weeks of running training to intercept a man on a road was, in Faye terms, an ordinary and proportionate approach to a problem. You could have found out my schedule and turned up at the coffee place, I said once, somewhere in month 3. I did find out your schedule. You don't go to the coffee place. She didn't look over. You don't go anywhere, Beau. That's actually the thing I noticed first. You go to school, you go home, and you run. That's the entire perimeter. That's not true. Name the last thing you did on a Saturday that wasn't in this town. I could not, and she let me not, which is one of the many things about her. I found out about the marriage in month 4 on a run, in the specific way you find out things on runs, which is that you're side by side and not looking at each other, and there's nowhere to be for another 20 minutes. 8 years. A man called Marsh, who she says was not a villain, and who she describes, when she describes him at all, in about 4 sentences of extreme fairness that took her 3 years of hard work to arrive at. I wanted somebody who needed him, she said, somewhere on the 2nd mile, and I have never needed anybody in my life, and I wasn't going to start pretending at 30. So he found somebody who did, eventually, and I want to be honest, that I understood it before I was angry about it. That's a generous read. It's an accurate read. Generous came about 2 years later. She was breathing hard and kept going. The thing that took longest wasn't him. It was working out that I'd married a man who needed me to be smaller, and I'd said yes at 23 because at 23 that reads as being wanted. I did not say anything for about half a mile, and then I said the only thing available, which was, I'm sorry that happened to you. Thank you. And then, because she is who she is. Right turn at the tower. I'm serious about that hill. I want it on record that she gave me that on the 2nd mile of an ordinary Wednesday. Freely. Without being asked. At a point in our acquaintance where she owed me nothing. That matters for what I did with it in October. We started having dinner in month 2. Then most Fridays. Then it stopped being a thing with a name and started being what my week was arranged around, which I noticed in about week 9 and did not mention. I want to describe one evening from that stretch because it's the one I'd point to. Late June, a Friday, at hers. She'd had a bad day, a child of about 7, a first appointment, a mother who'd told the kid the whole way there that it wouldn't hurt, which Faye says is the single worst preparation available, because it makes you a liar in the first 90 seconds. I told him it might, she said. I said some of this might feel horrible, and I'm going to tell you before each bit. And he was fine. I was completely fine, because a 7-year-old can handle almost anything if you stop lying to him about what's coming. His mother must have loved that. She was furious. Faye shrugged. She'll be less furious in about 4 years when he's the only kid in his class who isn't frightened of a chair. I remember sitting in her kitchen thinking, this woman tells people the true version of what's about to happen to them as a job all day, and then comes home and does it socially for free. I did not, at that point, connect that to anything about myself. I'd like it on record that the information was available. I want to be clear that this was the best 6 months of my adult life, and that I spent every one of them slightly braced. The scan was in September. I'd had pain in the same Achilles since about June. Not the old injury, a different quality of pain. The dull kind that doesn't announce itself and doesn't go away. I went to the sports clinic in Halverson in August. They took images and told me they'd send the report out. The envelope came on the 11th of September. I did not open it. I want to describe this accurately because he didn't open it makes it sound like a decision, and it wasn't a decision. It was an absence of one. I put it on the kitchen counter behind the fruit bowl, and every morning I got up at 6:10 and went and did the 4 miles, and every evening I came home and the envelope was still there. And at no point did I think, I am avoiding this. I thought, I'll do that on the weekend, about 42 times. There were 3 separate moments in those 6 weeks when I nearly did it, and I remember all 3, which tells you something. The first was the night it arrived. I picked it up, felt the weight of it, 2 sheets, maybe 3, and put it down again to make dinner, and then didn't come back to the kitchen until morning. The second was about a fortnight in, when the pain woke me at 4. I went down, stood in front of it with the light off, and worked out that if it said something bad, I would have to lie to Faye about it on Tuesday. And that seemed like an enormous amount of work at 4 in the morning, so I went back to bed. The third was the Sunday before she found it. Faye was in the shower upstairs and I was making coffee and I actually got my thumb under the flap. And then I thought, and this is the sentence, this is the whole thing, not while she's in the house. Because if it was bad, she'd see my face. And if she saw my face, we'd have to talk about it. And if we talked about it, I'd have to say out loud what the running was for. And I had not said that out loud to a single human being in 12 years, including myself. I put it back behind the fruit bowl and made her a coffee and asked about her Monday list. Faye found it on the 22nd of October. She wasn't snooping. She was making coffee in my kitchen and moved the fruit bowl, and there it was, 6 weeks old, sealed with the clinic's name on it. Beau. I came through and saw what she was holding, and something in my chest went cold in a way I want to be honest about, because it wasn't fear of the results. It was fear of the conversation. That's nothing. It's a diagnostic report from a sports medicine clinic dated the 8th of September, and it's still sealed. She put it down on the counter, flat, and turned round. I'm a dentist. Do you know how many sealed envelopes I've watched people not open? I've got patients who've had a letter about a biopsy on their fridge for 4 months. It's not a biopsy, it's an Achilles. That's not the point, and you know it isn't. Then what is the point, Faye? The point is you've been running on it every single morning for 6 weeks while a piece of paper on your counter has been telling you something you decided not to hear. You don't know what's in it. Neither do you. That's the entire problem. She hadn't raised her voice once, and it was making everything worse. Beau, I have this conversation 4 times a week. Not about Achilles tendons, about a shadow on an X-ray, about a lump somebody's had since March. And it is always, always the same thing, which is that the not knowing has stopped being frightening and become comfortable, and the envelope is the only thing standing between them and having to do something. Don't do the dentist voice at me. It's not a voice. It's the only thing I'm actually good at. She put her hands flat on the counter. I'm not asking you to open it in front of me. I'm asking you to notice that you haven't. And here is the part of this story I've had to tell honestly at some cost, because it's the worst thing I have ever done to another person. I turned on her. You've known me 8 months, I said. You ran up a hill at me and decided you knew what I needed. You've made a whole project out of it. The running, the Fridays, the perimeter. I said the word back to her. Has it occurred to you that I had a perimeter for a reason, and I didn't ask a woman who picks towns off a spreadsheet to come and audit it? She did not say anything. I said one more thing. I'm not going to write it down. It was about her marriage, which she had told me about in confidence in month 4, and I used it, accurately, as a weapon. And I watched it land. She picked up her coat and left. She did not slam anything. She said, "Okay," in a completely level voice, and went out my front door and crossed the road to her own house, and I stood in my kitchen next to an unopened envelope and understood exactly what I had just done, and could not think of one single way to undo it. I did not run the next morning. That was the first morning in 12 years. I lay in bed at 6:10 with the alarm off and did not get up, and I want to record that this was not growth. It was the specific paralysis of a man who has just discovered that the thing he does every day was load-bearing and has just broken the wall it was holding up. I didn't run for 9 days. I want to describe those 9 days because they were the most useful 9 days of my adult life, and every single one of them was horrible. The first 3, I barely left the house, except for school. I taught 5 periods a day of teenagers doing basketball drills, which is a job that requires you to be relentlessly encouraging for 6 hours. And then I came home and sat in a chair. On the 4th day, I opened the envelope. Chronic mid-portion tendinopathy with degenerative change. Not a rupture, not a tear, nothing surgical, but the report used the phrase cumulative loading, and the recommendation section, which I read about 11 times, said the words reduce frequency and modify to low-impact cross-training on non-running days, and at the end, daily high-mileage running is not advisable at this stage. I sat on my kitchen floor with it for a long time. What was in that envelope was not a diagnosis. It was a permission slip I did not want, because daily was the whole thing. Daily was what made me a runner instead of a man who used to run. If it's 3 times a week at a reduced pace, then what I've been doing for 12 years isn't a discipline. It's just a habit I've been using to avoid a conversation with myself about a race in Ohio in 2013. On the 5th and 6th days, I went through the drawer. 3,000 cards. 12 years, banded by year. I sat on the kitchen floor and went through them in order, which took most of a Saturday, and what I found was that the times almost never change. 31 minutes and some seconds, 3,000 times, for 12 years. A flat line. I had thought, for 12 years, that I was maintaining something. What that drawer actually shows is a man standing very still, at speed, since 2013. On the 8th day I called my brother, who does not do this kind of conversation, and who did it anyway. I said something to Faye. How bad? I told him. There was a silence on the line long enough that I checked the call was still connected. Beau, that's not you being hurt, that's you being cruel. He said it flatly. There's a difference, and it matters. You took a thing she gave you, and you sharpened it. I know. You don't get to explain it. There's no explaining that. A pause. You can apologize for it. That's the only move on the board, and she doesn't have to take it. I know that too. Right. Another pause. Longer. Can I say the other thing, or is it a bad night for it? Say it. Nobody in this family has ever asked you about the running. He said it carefully, which he does not usually do. Mum asked once. I've never asked. Sam's never asked. And I've known since about 2016 that it wasn't what you say it is. And I've said nothing for 9 years because it seemed like it was helping, and it wasn't mine. It was helping. It was holding. That's different, and I think you've worked that out this week, or you wouldn't have rung me. I heard him move the phone. For what it's worth, the woman across the road looked at it for 8 months and said it out loud. That's not an intrusion, Beau. That's the first person who's had the nerve. I did not run the next morning, either. I went over on the 9th day. She opened the door and did not invite me in, which was correct. I'm not here to explain it, I said. There's no explanation that's worth your time. I said something to you about your marriage that I knew would hurt you, and I said it on purpose, because you'd got close to something I've spent 12 years not looking at, and I wanted you further away. That's what it was. I'm sorry, and you don't have to do anything with that. Faye Dunbar stood in her doorway for a long moment. Okay, she said. Okay. I'm still angry. You should be. No. I want you to hear the shape of it, because you'll get it wrong on your own. She didn't move from the doorway. I'm not angry that you shouted. People shout. I'm angry because you were accurate. You didn't lash out, Beau. You aimed. You took the one thing I've told you that I haven't told anybody in this town, and you used it correctly. First time, no warm-up. I know. That means you'd been holding it, not consciously maybe, but it was somewhere you could reach it fast. Her jaw went. That's what I've been sitting with for 9 days. Not the sentence. The filing system. I did not have anything to say to that because she was right and I had reached the same conclusion on about day 6 and had not been able to phrase it that well. I'm going to be angry for a while, Beau. That's not a thing that resolves in a doorway. She crossed her arms. Did you open it? On Tuesday. And? Cumulative loading. Degenerative change. 3 times a week at a slower pace and cross-training the rest, or it gets worse. My voice did something, and I let it. It's not serious. That's the thing I can't. It's not serious, Faye. It's a nothing diagnosis. I've had a piece of paper on my counter for 6 weeks that says you can keep running, just less, and I couldn't open it. And I burned down the best thing in my life rather than find out. She looked at me for a long time. Come in, she said. Not because I've forgiven you. Because you're crying on a doorstep, and my neighbors are extremely nosy. It took about 2 months to get back to anything. I want to be honest about that rather than compress it, because the version where an apology fixes it in an afternoon is a lie, and it's a harmful one. She made me do things I did not want to do. She made me say out loud more than once what running had been standing in for. She made me tell her about Ohio properly, which I had never done with anyone, including my brother, including the 2 women I dated in my 20s. Vaz. The Ohio conversation took 2 hours, and I was not good at it. She asked one question about every 4 minutes and otherwise said nothing, which I have since worked out is exactly how she gets frightened people through an extraction. The field ran past me, I said, at some point near the end of it. I know, you've said that 3 times. Have I? You've said it 3 times, and every time your voice does the same thing. She was sitting on the floor with her back against her sofa. Beau, they were supposed to run past you. That's the race. What you're describing isn't a betrayal. It's a 10,000 meters. I know that. You know it. You've never once said it. She let that sit. Say it. I said it. It took me 2 attempts, and it was worse than I expected. And she was clear about one thing from the start. I'm not managing this for you, she said in about week 3. I'll be here. I'm not going to be your accountability partner, and I'm not going to ask you every morning whether you did the cross-training. If you want to wreck your Achilles, that's yours. I've got a job. That's cold. That's the opposite of cold, and when you've thought about it for a week, you'll know why. She was right. It took 11 days. What I worked out, on day 11, on a stationary bike in my garage at 6:15 in the morning, is that every other person in my life had handled the running by not mentioning it. My mother asked once in 12 years. My brother never. Colleagues made jokes about it at Christmas parties, and what all of that had communicated, gently and constantly, was, we've all decided not to look at this with you. Faye looked at it, said what it was, and then declined to carry it. That is the single most respectful thing anybody has ever done for me, and it did not feel like it at the time. I want to be honest about the first year of the new arrangement, because it was not a montage. The bike was the worst of it. A stationary bike in a garage at 6:15 in December is not a workout. It's a punishment with no dignity in it, and for about 4 months I hated every minute and did it badly. There is no version of me that finds that satisfying, and I have stopped expecting to. The Tuesdays and Thursdays and Sundays were harder in a different way. 4 miles at a pace that wouldn't have humiliated me at 22, on a body that could clearly go faster and had been told not to. About once a fortnight, that spring, I'd get to the bottom of Prine and open up for 200 meters out of pure spite, and then have to stop and stand there feeling stupid. Faye never once commented on it. She'd said what she'd said in week 3, and then she held to it exactly for a year, which I did not appreciate properly until about month 8. The thing that eventually helped was not discipline. It was that in March, I got asked to coach the school's cross-country squad. 11 kids, most of them not good, one of them very good. And I said yes for the first time in 9 years of being asked. I got home from the first session, and Faye looked at my face and said, "There it is," and did not elaborate. and went back to her book. I run 3 mornings a week now. Tuesday, Thursday, Sunday. 4 miles at a pace that would have humiliated me at 22. On the other days, I'm on a bike in my garage at 6:15, which I hate, and which I do. I want to tell you about the cards, because it's the part that means the most to me, and it's the smallest. For 12 years, I wrote my time on an index card after every run and put it in the drawer in the kitchen. Every single one. 3,000 of them, banded in years. There's one card in that drawer with no time on it. The 17th of March. The morning Faye Dunbar came up on my left shoulder at the bottom of Prine Street with no air in her body. I got home that morning, and I got the card out and the pen out, and I sat there and I could not remember the time. Not approximately. I had run that loop 3,000 times and knew my split at every corner, and I had genuinely no idea. Because a woman had spent 3 weeks training to intercept me, and had then made jokes about it while dying of oxygen debt. So I wrote what happened instead. Faye caught me on Prine. 3 WKS training. Didn't check watch. That's the only card in 12 years with words on it. She found it about a year later, going through the drawer looking for a takeaway menu, and stood in my kitchen holding it, and didn't say anything for a long stretch. You wrote it down. I write everything down. That's the illness. Beau? She turned it round. You wrote me down. On the day, before anything had happened. Something had happened. I proposed on Prine Street at the bottom of the hill on the 17th of March, 3 years to the day. She saw it coming from about 200 meters out because we were running and I slowed down, and I have never once slowed down. Why are you... She stopped. Oh, you absolute... Give me a second. I've got no air either. You've got plenty of air. You're a professional. I'm a PE teacher, Faye. It's not the same thing. I got it out of the zip pocket, which had been the single hardest logistical problem of the entire plan. 3 years ago, you chased me down this street because I wouldn't stop long enough to have a conversation. I've thought about that every week since. Somebody had to come and get me, and it was you, and you had to train for it. Beau, I'd like to be the one doing the catching up for the rest of it. Marry me. She said yes on a public road in running clothes at 7 in the morning, and then she sat down on the curb because her legs had gone, and I sat down next to her, and a man walking a dog crossed to the other side of the street to avoid whatever was happening. I need you to know something, she said, still on the curb. I didn't chase you because you were a project. Everyone's going to assume that. My sister already assumes it. I've never thought that. You have. Not now. In October you did. You said it in your kitchen. She wasn't accusing, just correcting the record. I chased you because I moved to a town where I knew nobody, off a spreadsheet, at 31, after a marriage I'd got wrong, and there was a man across the road who got up at 6:10 every single morning and did a hard thing on his own with nobody watching. That's not romantic, Faye, that's a symptom. It's both. That's what I've been trying to tell you for 3 years. She bumped her shoulder into mine. I didn't want to fix you. I wanted whatever that was. And it turned out the thing underneath it was worse and better than I expected, which is true of everybody, and I stayed. We married the following September. Small, her sister, my brother, about 30 people, in a field outside Kirby because Faye did not want a room. My brother gave a toast that was 4 sentences, and one of them was a joke about the bike in my garage. Her sister cried and told everybody the 3 weeks of training story with far more embellishment than the fact support, including a section about interval work that never happened. We ran the morning of the wedding, both of us, the loop, Tuesday pace. It was a Saturday, but I'm allowed to move one. Right at the water tower, not left, because she has never let that go, and because she was correct. There's a framed card in our hallway. Index card, 12 years of company. 1 line of handwriting in pen. Visitors don't ask about it because it looks like nothing, a bit of card with a date and a scrawl. About once a year somebody does ask, and Faye gets there first every single time. That's the day I caught him, she says. It took 3 weeks and I've never let him forget it. And that's true. And it's the good version. And it's the one we tell. The truer one is on the card itself, in my handwriting. On the only morning in 12 years I forgot to look at my watch. I still keep the cards. 3 days a week now instead of 5, and the times are slower and getting slower, and I write them down anyway. There's a second box in that drawer these days. Faye started it about a year in, without asking me. And it's her times on the same loop in her handwriting, and hers are getting faster. At some point in the next few years, those two lines are going to cross. She has mentioned this repeatedly, at length, in front of guests. Have you ever built a whole routine around something you were refusing to look at? Tell me your story in the comments. If you liked this one, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.